Good afternoon, I'm David Anderson. I will be presenting an analysis of the journal article, Visual Hierarchy Relates to Impressions of Good Design. Today, I'll be talking about this article by Yoko Urano, Aaron Kurosu, Greg Hinselman-Petrusik, and Alexander Todorov, and it is, of course, titled Visual Hierarchy Relates to Impressions of Good Design. First, we'll address the notion of visual hierarchy. Next, we'll go into their research on whether or not it truly exists as more than a concept. And finally, we'll take a look at the results of their experiment and then the key takeaways for practitioners of cartography, geographic visualization, and GIS. In his work, Christopher Wesson alerts the reader to the concept of visual hierarchy and also that of Gestalt, which addresses the balance of the shape and form of the content which is being presented, and how that impacts the way that people perceive, process, and trust the data being presented. Wesson suggests that it is critical to any serious geographic visualization or other presentation. With that in mind, we can see that visual hierarchy is valued across many different industries. In my current role as a program manager, it's critical to the information I present to my customer and my teams. When I was a staff officer at the Pentagon, it was critical in the creation of charts and data that I would routinely brief to generals and other decision makers. And even in the flying world, the overall suitability, or the visual hierarchy of the maps you create for your flight, is critiqued both during training events and routine evaluations. And my instructors even discussed the concepts which Wesson calls Gestalt when I was in the combat flight instructor course during my upgrade to become an instructor and later an evaluator. Wesson and Brewer and many other practitioners of GIS and leaders in the field of cartography and geographic visualization address how critical of an aspect visual hierarchy is to the work that we do. With all of the emphasis that we place on visual hierarchy, what if the concept of visual hierarchy is simply that? What if it is just a mental construct that really doesn't make a difference? Up to the point that Urano, who is an art student at Princeton University, Kurosu, a doctoral candidate in psychology at Princeton University, Hinselman-Petrusik, a postdoctoral research in brain image analysis and explainable artificial intelligence at Oxford University, and Todorov, a professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, undertook the study in 2021, the concept of visual hierarchy had not been explored experimentally because teams had not yet determined how to accurately go about collecting and measuring the data to test the theories behind visual hierarchy. The underlying psychological and physiological basis for visual hierarchy is rooted in the study of overt and covert attention processes and how they interact to direct a viewer to focus to maximize information gain while looking at an image. There was a hypothesis of how tracking eye movements could be used to evaluate the data, but no one had designed, much less created, an experiment capable of proving out that hypothesis. In order to rectify that, the team devised a setup with a computer screen at a constant distance from a chin rest, where the participant would rest their chins and keep their heads from moving while viewing images. They had cameras to track the eye movements of the participants within 5 degrees and a series of 120 posters which they had converted into grayscale to account for any participants with color vision deficiency, and each participant had 5 seconds to view and evaluate and then rate those posters on a 1 to 9 scale on a numeric keypad which was sitting next to the chin rest. As a control, they had the participants follow a dot on the screen to calibrate the cameras while capturing the eye movements. The experimental setup allowed the researchers to capture eye movement of the participants accurately enough and gauge their reaction through the numeric input to the posters, and these posters, which were already assessed to have differing levels of elements defined as having good visual hierarchy by design rules, in order to track the similarity of eye movements among the 30 participants and capture a metric which was called the Frechette distance. The Frechette distance is a measurement of the maximum distance between 2 points on different trajectories, and they used that to determine how similar subject eye movement was in the test, with the lower Frechette distances indicating the most similar trajectories. The results of the experiment were promising in demonstrating that the concept of visual hierarchy was more than a myth. It now had actual physiological and psychological evidence to back it up through experimental means. For the results of their experiment, in Figure 1, we see the mapping of eye movements while the participants were scanning the black and white posters, and we can see a stronger joint impression of good design with those more similar eye movements in the poster on the left. As you will see in that poster on the left, it is mainly a graphic. There is some light text in the image, but it has a very good overall layout, and we see the similarity of the eye movements and the ability to have that maximized information gain as the eyes track down and across the poster. The poster on the right is a combination of both graphic information and textual information. And the big thing that we see here is eye movements are moving much more across it in that visual poster on the right, which indicates a lower level of visual hierarchy and good design. And with what we've learned in our course, we can also see that just objectively, it would have a lower visual hierarchy score. In Figure 2, we see the data which was plotted from the experiment on the left. And it has some outliers, but it does significantly match the expected results from their hypothesis, which is depicted in the shaded triangle on the right. The key takeaways of this for cartography and GIS practitioners is that visual hierarchy is a valid concept, and it influences the perceived goodness of a map and its accuracy. We also see that while experts and novices do process information differently, a well-designed map is still more readily processed and easily processed and usable by both groups of people. And last but not least, we see the visual hierarchy contributes to the ease of processing the information, and it is a key to creating effective maps. For the references, if you would like to do any additional reading, they are available on this slide. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.